Welcome to Arizona football today. Parents Weekend as the Wildcats getting set to take on the UCLA Bruins tonight at the stadium. I'm David Kelly, joined as always by Glenn Howe. U of A football class of 1985. Glenn, the second start in a row for Jordan McLeod. What do you want to see from this guy? Obviously at the top of the list.
Yeah.
Less turnovers.
Yeah, less turnovers. Well, he's got a week with the first team, so he's got a week working with them, working with the receivers, connection with the receivers, and connecting with the tight ends. That's what I want to see.
All right, we'll get to the tight ends in a minute, but let's talk about Dorian Thompson-Robinson on the other side, the fabulous quarterback for UCLA, having his best season. What do you want to see from the Wildcats in terms of how they try to contain him?
Well, we got to box him in. That's what we have to do. We have to box him in. We got to make sure that he's not getting loose and running for that 3rd and long and getting that first down, or 3rd and 7, 3rd and 12. If we get him in those situations, we don't want him to get out and get loose and throwing the ball and making first downs on the run. And we can't do that. I don't know if they're going to spy on him or we're going to have somebody on him, but we can't let him do that and kill us with our legs.
Well, Glenn, my one player to watch from the Bruins is their tight end, Greg Dulcich. I think that he is a first-round caliber tight end. We have not seen the emergence of the tight end with Arizona as we had hoped.
Well, I really like to see it more, because if we do that, if we're running the ball, that means that the linebackers are coming up. We need to sneak somebody behind them. We need to make sure that those safeties are also being checked, because we want to make sure they understand that we will throw to the tight end, throw it behind them or underneath them.
And Glenn, it's mostly been edge routes to the tight ends. We have not seen a lot of stuff in the seams, and that is one of the things that I want to see.
Yeah, and if we run the ball, that means that the linebackers are going to be coming closer to the line of scrimmage. We need to get behind them to keep them honest. The safeties also, keep them honest. Understand that we will burn you if you get over and you come up too far on the line of scrimmage. We can run the ball against UCLA. We got to be able to establish that. We got to get, last week we had 51 runs. We need to get into the 40s, I think, this week. Get into the 40s again and be able to run the ball and control the ball and take the ball out of his hands, DTR's hands.
All right, Arizona and UCLA, Glenn, has always been a rivalry pretty much in every sport. We've seen monumental battles on the basketball court, two of the best programs in the softball realm as well. Even Jared Tevis came out this week and said next to Arizona State, UCLA was the game that he looked forward to the most. Well, the rivalry got jacked up a little bit this week, and it actually came, Glenn, from the coaches. First, I want you to hear a little something of what Jedd Fisch said in his press conference this week about conversations that he had with Chip Kelly about the potential of him going to work for Chip in Philadelphia.
I've crossed paths throughout, at different times throughout our careers. I think I met him originally when I was at the University of Miami. I was the offensive coordinator, and he came down for a couple days. We spent probably about a day and a half together at different times throughout the day. And then in 2013, we spoke about me going to work for him in Philadelphia. I took the offensive coordinator job in Jacksonville.
All right, now let's hear what Chip Kelly had to say about that, Glenn, when he was asked about it.
Was there any consideration to adding him to your staff?
I'd already had our staff in place.
Okay.
Is it accurate that you tried to hire Jedd when you were at Philadelphia?
No.
Oh, okay. He mentioned that yesterday, that you guys had talked about him going to Philadelphia.
No, I knew Jedd. I've known Jedd for a long time, but I did not talk to him about that.
Okay, so you've got a difference of opinion there about how that conversation back in whatever it was, 2013, went down. Jedd Fisch was asked about that on Thursday.
You had said the other day that you had talked to Chip Kelly about maybe joining his staff with the Eagles, and then one of the UCLA reporters asked him about that, and he said that didn't happen. So what is it actually?
I guess we have different recollections of 10 years ago, but we'll focus in on the game on Saturday night, which I think is far more important than what happened in 2013.
Okay, so now a lot of people are saying, is this a deal? Is this a big deal? But let me kind of explain to you why I believe there's a bit of concern here. And it's because one of the narratives that's out there about Jedd Fisch is that he was an all-state tennis player in high school. It's a narrative that we've come to learn was not true, and just a little cursory check of records, and he grew up in a part of North Jersey where the local newspaper covered high school sports very carefully, There are records out there that indicate that at worst, Jedd Fisch, as a high school senior tennis player, his record was 2-9. Now, what I want to say about that is that I have not found any instance, and I spent about several hours over the course of this last week looking into this whole thing, as it was brought to my attention a couple of weeks ago about this discrepancy in his tennis career. I have not found anything, Glenn, that I can pin that came from Jedd Fisch, that he said at any point in any interview or anything that he said that he was an all-state tennis player. My guess is that it was something that was pinned on him by the media at some point to kind of flesh out the fact that he was a kid who grew up playing tennis, did not grow up playing football, and then became this football coach. So I think that's an important thing to point out, and it's shown up in some articles along the way about Jedd Fisch. I talked to a writer who wrote one of those articles to kind of ask him, was this something that Jedd said to you? He said it was not something that Jedd said. It was something that they had cultivated from other media sources. So that's my guess on how that got out there. If Jedd Fisch is guilty of anything in this respect, it's that he let that narrative continue without shutting it down right away. But that's why this became such a big deal this week, and I think it's important. I'm looking at it as, look, that was strike one. The thing with Chip Kelly is strike two. If we see another instance in the future where a piece of misinformation comes out through Jedd Fisch, that's when we begin to wonder, okay, are we getting a lot of the true statements that we need to be getting from the head coach?
Yeah, I totally understand how that happens, okay? Because it's happened to me many a times. I was in training camp with the Raiders. In training camp, okay?
Doesn't mean you played for the Raiders.
Doesn't mean I played for the Raiders. A lot of people kind of, oh, you played for the Raiders. And the first thing that I do all the time is say, I did not make the final roster. I was in training camp with the Raiders. And I make that very, very clear. I don't go to NFL alumni stuff. I can't do that because I'm not an NFL alumni. Did not make the final roster. It's my responsibility to do that. I clarify that every time, and that's what I do. And I can understand that happens because people say, oh, you played at the U of A, you played at the Raiders. I said, no, I was in training camp with the Raiders.
And that's a huge, I'm glad you pointed that out, Glenn, because a couple weeks ago I interviewed Philip Stewart, the head coach over at Marana High School. And one of the things you hear about him was he played in the NFL for the Rams. Well, no, it's exactly what you said. He did not play in the NFL with the Rams. He was in camp. He was on maybe the practice squad one season with the Rams, but he never actually appeared in an NFL game. There's a huge difference between being on a roster. It's like Bruce Arians used to always say during mini camps and training camps, these are not the Cardinals. This team, what you're seeing in training camp and mini camps is not the Cardinals. The 53 guys that show up on opening day,
Cardinals.
Those are the Cardinals.
Yes,
so,
it totally is because I've had it. It's been over 30 years. I still deal with this, man. People still remember that I was in training camp, and I can't believe they do because it was only for a minute. You know, I was an LA Raider for just a minute in training camp. Went to mini camp, went to training camp, and got cut, and that was it. So that's what we have to understand as, I think, as just an honest dude to say it, to tell people and correct them.
Yeah, so it's not a big deal, but I think it's a deal, and it's something we need to talk about and make sure, because we do. This is what we do. We talk about Arizona football and all that is Arizona football. It was something that came out this week. It was something with the tennis that came out a few weeks ago that was alerted to me. So I think it's definitely something we need to look into and make sure that all the facts are correct, because we have seen coaches who have lost jobs because of things that have come up on their resumes. I also went back and looked at a number of Jedd Fisch bios. There is nothing in any bio that I could find that states that he was an all-state tennis player. It's a narrative that's out there, but a narrative that he never obviously corrected. So.
And that's no fault to Jedd too, because Jedd is doing. People will say things. He has so many other stuff to think about than thinking about saying, "Oh man, I wasn't a state." But correct it. Put it on the record and correct that. That's all I think. That's all I was saying.
All right, let's get back to the football and the Arizona Wildcats. And Booby Curry, Glenn, is a guy that's kind of emerged at the wide receiver position over the last couple of games. We kind of actually saw it going back to the San Diego State game where he made a nice pick on the late touchdown pass in that ball game by Will Plummer, and then he came out in the game against Northern Arizona, had a couple of touchdowns. So what have you seen as the emergence of him? Because he was a guy that we always heard a lot about, obviously coming in here with Grant Cannell last year, had some struggles as a freshman, but seems to be finding his way now as a playmaker on this roster.
I think this staff has really seen the potential in Boobie. And also, he's lost some weight too. And he's a little leaner, and I think he's a little bit faster, and he's feeling a little bit more confident about it, more explosive. And I think he's really getting down, because what I like what he's saying, he wants to make them professionals. Professionals as being an athlete, not going to the next level, but being a professional as an athlete. That means that working on your craft. That means that running the drills right, running the amount of yards you're supposed to go to, and making the right cuts and everything. Those are the kind of things, and those things are building up and starting to produce better players.
All right, let's end on the jet sweeps, Glenn. I asked Jedd Fisch about the jet sweeps into the short side, into the boundary, that we've seen a lot of those plays, the screen passes into the short boundary. Let's hear what Jedd had to say earlier this week about that.
The boundary run game and the boundary passing game in college is very different than in pro football. In pro football, you very rarely would ever run into the boundary. You very rarely do much in the boundary. In college football, you get so much field pressure that a lot of times most of those plays were alerted away from blitz. So if you had blitz coming to the field, you would run into the boundary. If you had blitz coming from the boundary, we would run to the field. So there might be some times that we've called some jet sweeps, or we've called wide receiver screen or two, and we were just throwing away from the pressure or running away from the pressure, not necessarily in terms of ideal on every time, but I know that, there's plenty of good plays that can be made into the boundary, especially if you're going fast. If you're going fast, you don't really want to run your guys on both sides of the field. You just kind of live with the formation that's built.
Okay, Glenn, he talked about pressure. Now, I'm going to show this one play here where there is no pressure coming from what is known as the field side, which when you're on is the opposite hash side. So I have not necessarily seen a lot, though, of what he said that is the reason that they do that.
Well, there's two things that could have happened. That they had a call made, a play call, and the quarterback just didn't check out of it. They didn't check out of it. They thought they saw pressure, and they were going to run that play. We're going into the boundary side, and there was going to be rushing from the back end, and they thought they can get a run away with it, but they didn't read it right. And that's part of the process of understanding defenses, understanding what they're seeing. Because these teams are just disguising all kinds of looks nowadays. It's really, really kind of hard sometimes for these quarterbacks to see it, because you got all this stuff going on. You got to make your checks. You see a guy move, and then he backs out, then he comes in. There's all kinds of things they have to look at, and it could be simple as they just made the wrong check.
All right, well, it's the Wildcats and the UCLA Bruins. A lot of strange things have happened in this rivalry. We had a streaker 10 years ago. We had a fight 10 years ago. Biggest win of the Tim Kish, Tim Kish era as head coach. And then, of course, beating DTR and the Bruins on this same field back in 2019. We will be back to break it down for you on Sunday night.